So my name is Matt. I used to work at hotels for pretty much all my working and studying life. And then that created really easy conversation starters. I'd get in a taxi and they'd be like, oh, where do you work? I work at Hilton. And they're like, oh, I've got a bad situation that I experienced at Hilton, or everyone has like a story in a hotel. Then I moved to tech, and I found that in an Uber, the driver will say like, oh, what do you do? And I say like, oh, we build software for hotels. And it's a conversation killer. There's truly nothing left to talk about at that point, and we just sit there in silence until the end of the Uber ride. So I found that I need to explain the challenge of my job in a different way. So I try and really describe the problem that we're solving as a company in hotels, the way that my mother would get it. So I always say have you ever stood in the queue at a reception desk? Which everyone has. And have you ever wondered why you got stuck in this queue and why it takes so long to get people checked in 2018? So if you break down that process, and I'm going to take a very simple scenario, we do much more than just this, but this is the scenario that everyone always gets and grasps because we've had these terrible experiences at hotels. So the first step is always the receptionist looking down at their screen, and you're hoping that they're going to look up at some point and look you in the eye and saying, I am ready for you now. Then they have to find that booking. They've got to attempt maybe to upsell. I've never been upsold before, but I know that that's in the standards in hotels. You need to print a registration card, which the customer needs to fill in by hand with a pen, and that needs to then get punched back into the system by the receptionists. Credit cards, right? So I've got to ask you for your credit card. Even though you booked on booking.com, that credit card was already fed to the hotel in some way or form, but you have to physically hand it to a receptionist to take a pre-authorization. Then you need to find a clean room. If the room isn't clean, you need to call the housekeeper to kind of allocate a clean room. You need to cut these keys, these plastic cards. That's a process because door locks are the most antiquated tech in hotels today. And there are very few parties that can truly automate that. And then the last step is to really say, oh, breakfast starts at this time, the elevators are over there, we've got a gym, and to really relay all of the information that you could really find online, or you could have communicated to the guest in a better way. So why is this so complicated? This 2018, you're all on your smartphones. You're doing everything with your smartphones. If I check into an airline, I do that with my smartphone. I don't have to communicate with anyone. But in a hotel, they force me to communicate. And if you ask a hotelier today, they're like, because we're creating real experiences. And I say, what? To ask me to fill in my registration card and give you my credit card? That isn't a genuine human interaction. And the technology that we have should really be enabling a real interaction. So in 2012, which is when I left Hilton to go work at this company Mews, that's exactly what we were thinking. We thought we need to change the way that hotels think and work. So the first hotel where our company started was called The Emblem. It's a 60-bedroom hotel in Prague, and we built it from the ground up. So the idea there was we never purchased a reception desk. So we were building an app, and we're like, okay, now we need to integrate into the guest database. So you call Oracle or Opera at the time, and then you get stuck because they don't have an open API and you have to pay them 50,000 euros. And we're like, shit, so how are we going to get this guest data that sits in this box, this PMS, somewhere in a database, into our app to get guests to download this app to really interact with the reception? So we basically said to the owners, like, give us the 50,000 euro you're going to spend on Oracle, and we will build you a new system in the cloud that's going to enable this. So he gave us the 50,000 euros, which was a good starting capital for the first few months. And we started building this PMS in the cloud, mobile optimized, so that a receptionist can walk with a tablet to the guest at the door, welcome them at the door, rather than standing in some queue at a reception desk in a really impersonal experience. And we integrated a payment gateway, mobile payment gateway, so that the credit card is already charged by the time the guest gets through the issue. The receipt was already sent to the customer, so that there is no talk about payments. Guests can check in online, so they can do all of that filling in of registration cards online. So by the time you get in, all you need is that key, because the keys are the worst part of our industry, like I said earlier. And there is still very little integration. So we actually figured out to build a kiosk on there so that we can really issue these keys automatically. But this is really where it started 6 years ago, and we slowly started growing from there. So at that time, we actually did a Google search for Open API, PMS systems, but if you just Google PMS systems and you go to the images, you see what the problem of our industry is. There are these horrific systems from the 80s and 90s that we're stuck to using because we've always done it. And in our industry, it's one of those, no one's ever been fired for buying IBM. In our industry, it's no one's ever been fired for buying Oracle. And it is a safe decision to go for, but they aren't the most flexible in integrating and having an open API and just trialing out different integrations. And that's really the problem of our industry. It has to move into 2018 in an open API platform kind of mindset. So I apologize, like it's a lot of text. I took this from Wikipedia, I didn't write it, but I just wanted to clarify what an open platform actually means. So let's read through it together. In computing, an open platform describes a software system which is based on open standards such as published and fully documented external APIs, application programming interfaces that allow using the software to function in other ways than the original programmer intended. So you can really use that API to add features to the existing infrastructure if the system doesn't work in the way that you want it to work. Using these interfaces, a third party could integrate with the platform to add functionality. So we as a platform, we're young, so we might not have all the functionality, but if you're missing something, just build it. Like that's what we wanted to do. And it just, we put our API out there on our internet and we just see hundreds of people now integrating into our platform to create different experiences. If you want to do an upsell app where you contact the customers beforehand, like great, here's the guest data. As long as you're GDPR compliant, you can take it. Then you can give them an upsell. You can then upgrade the room, change the rate in the system without us knowing about it or having to communicate with anyone because that's being done through the API. So using an open platform, you can add features or functionalities that the platform vendor hadn't yet completed. Right? So we're being asked to build feature on feature. And I've probably got a feature list of hundreds of feature requests that will match some old feature that you're used to in your old PMS. But we're saying, well, you don't need it because you can build it yourself, or you can find a vendor that's integrated somehow with us that can then facilitate that connection. So if you look at the greatest platform of all, I'm sure half of the room is using an Apple device here. And it's really, that's kind of what, if you think about a platform, what you should think of. So your smartphone, you have some great basic apps, which is similar what the PMS does. So you can do your emails, you've got music in there, you can have a calendar in there. So the basic apps are great, but then you go into the App Store and you download other apps to kind of work with all of the, interact with the other apps that are existing. And that's how we feel the industry of hospitality and platforms in hospitality should be moving, where you buy this one main platform and then through the store, I just download or get access to another app that takes the data and that natively interacts with that data to create a much better guest experience. So that's what we built. So we started with that small hotel in Prague. We opened up the API a few years later once we had really perfected some of the system features. And today we see hotels that don't have a check-in desk anymore. They've literally gone to an SMS-based check-in where a customer will get an SMS with their room number and a PIN code to open the door. We integrate with mobile door lock solutions, so you get issued your key on your smart device. And that's really the direction that we've taken it. And by being in the cloud, not just the hotel get access to that system from the internet, but also the guests, right? So they can check themselves in online because suddenly they get access to that database. They own their profile. So rather than taking this registration card that we printed at the check-in and then a receptionist retyping that in the system with all the spelling mistakes because they can't read the handwriting of the guest fills it in themselves. So your marketing database is much more powerful and it kind of builds in a much cleaner way. So we have hotels in a luxury environment where they walk around with the tablets. You've got budget hotels where they have a kiosk, which we supply for free to hotels. You've got locations where they do it SMS based. And most hotels, they have reception desks like they had because that's how the hotel was built and they didn't want to get rid of the reception desk. And that's fine also. We're just saying, think out of the box. When you think about changing the guest experience, don't think about reception desks. Think about what do you want to happen the moment the guest walks through your door. What should that experience look like? And then build a solution around it. And you can completely do that on your own. So there's still, like most hotels today, I would say 95% are within on-premise, which means that you have the solution on a server locally or at the chain head office, but it's not properly in the cloud. It's not natively built in the cloud. And then you've got the cloud solutions, and the cloud solutions are still very young. There's a few players, but we're all very young. but you get all the flexibility of that API. So you need to choose between, am I going to buy a system that's really rich of features, but with zero flexibility to build my solution? Or am I going to buy a system that might miss some of the features, but has a great API, and I can get really flexible to kind of modify that experience myself according to my brand in my hotel? So when you're in the cloud, for example, we released last week a passport scanner, right? It's one of the problems in hotels. Why are we filling it in, or why are you asking guests to fill in their data of their passport themselves when you have a camera on every computer nowadays? So we just used an OCR integration to basically hold the passport in front of the camera of the computer. We read the data of the guest and we update the profiles, and we rolled it out to all of our hotels with literally a flick of a switch. And that's how innovation should be. You shouldn't have to then buy the licensing of the next package. It's insane. In the cloud, I should overnight add a feature in your system, and from the next one day to the next day, you have a passport scanner, and you don't have to buy hardware that you have to scan passports with. And that's kind of the possibility. So we're now looking at integrating an artificial intelligence platform through Microsoft, where through your email address, we will scrape the internet to find a picture of you, then figure out if you are a VIP. We will tag your guest profile in the system saying this is a VIP, and this is the status that they have, so that you won't be missed when you walk into the reception. And when you see the arrivals list, you see the pictures of the guests, so you can recognize customers and you can use their names as and when they walk in, to really use technology to personalize these experiences. So we believe that the future of PMSs is by putting the PMS at the core of your hotel and plugging everything on it. And I know that there's different platforms in the industry that are trying to do the same thing, but if you aren't at the heart of the data, where the receptionist is punching in the data, then it becomes secondary data that's been pushed through an API already. You've already lost parts of those data points. So we feel that the PMS needs to be at the core of that. So what I'm always trying to get hotels to do is to think out of that kind of traditional thinking, like we are limited by the system, and to think like a startup. If I don't like a system in our company, I just change it. Right, so like we've gone everything in the cloud, we've interconnected everything through Zapier, which is a wonderful platform, and I'll get to Zapier later. If I don't like a system, and we implemented a feature request board, an online one, and it was fine when we were scaling. Now it sucks. We've unplugged it, we've plugged in the next one, we migrate the data, and we're good to go. And that's how easy it should be. So you can, as a hotel, think like a startup if you have the right platform in place and really change those guest experiences. So you can work with existing, so we have about 150 integrations, and most cloud systems will have those, but you can also go and hire a developer. So we have hotels that build their own kiosk solution or integrated different platforms, and when you have a developer on staff who knows how to connect APIs, you can really create your own experience. And where you traditionally would hire an IT manager, right, who manages the printers and the computers and the network and the on-premise solution, rather invest that money into hiring a developer to create your custom experience at the hotel. So when you get the developer, something that I learned the hard way is I would always go like, well, in Fidelio, this is how this and this worked, and that's the feature we need to build. And the developer would go back to me and he's like, no. What is the problem you're solving in the hotel? So it took me a few years to get used to that kind of mindset. But if we were to copy every feature that Oracle would have in their system, we don't get a better system. We get the same system just in the cloud. So our developers will always ask me, don't describe the feature to me, just describe what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and we will find a better way to solve that in the cloud. So the way we think about our architecture is you've got us in the middle, and then you can plug in, right? So you've got revenue management systems, we've got about 6 or 7. Here we've got Pace, who are on our stand. You've got Oki, which do great upselling. They do a pre-arrival experience, they invite the customers to buy an upgraded room. Lightspeed for your POS, Power BI for your data. If you're in a hotel chain, you want to pull all that PMS data into Power BI, which is a great data platform, and then kind of mash it. So if I would ask you a question, could you tell me how many arrivals you had yesterday coming through Booking.com that were female between the ages of 30 and 60? None of you could tell me that answer today, because it would take you forever to figure this out. in Power BI, you've got all these toggles that you can really mesh out the data and really analyze very quickly these answers that your GM is looking for or your marketing team is looking for. And the amount of integrations is endless. I just have a look at the website at some of the cool integrations we have, but you need to really think about the PMS at the core and then plugging everything in. So we always believe that technology should hyper-personalize guest experiences. And the fear that hoteliers have, when I say something like an online check-in, they're like, no, but we want to create a real guest experience. I'm like, but your experience is about asking about credit cards and registration cards, and it's really about like these monkey jobs that they're doing. So rather let us remove all of that work, and then you can actually have a genuine conversation. And it's scary to really have a genuine conversation with a customer, and you need to train your staff for it. But that's our aim. So let the technology do what we do best, and then you can engage your customers in a different way. So we found this company, and they changed the way that we run our business incredibly well. So they are a system where you can connect different cloud solutions and make them talk to each other without needing a formal integration. So I'm going to give some examples so you get the idea. So traces, if anyone's ever worked with Oracle. So traces are a thing to remind a person to do something at a specific time. For example, you've got, there's a trace that says, call the GM on arrival of this VIP customer. And if you're working in a sales team or if you're the GM, most of the time they will forget to call you because they didn't see the trace, or they're in front of the customer. I can't pick up the phone and say, oh, Mr. Johnson, the VIP is here. So this is one of those challenges. And we get these hotels who are like, could you build us traces? And we're like, but it doesn't make sense. Why don't we automate that? So if you work with, for example, Zapier, when this happens, then do that. So the example is, if guest with profile that is tagged as VIP is checked in, so when this happens, he's checked in, then send an SMS or send a Slack message or whatever platform you work with to this person. So that could be the GM or the salesperson, and that way you don't have to have a manual reminder to do a manual task to pick up the phone. The system will take care of it, so that you don't disrupt that whole check-in experience, but you use a cloud platform to really enable you to focus on the guest experience. So, for example, that's the same example. So this is a good one, right? So you have VIPs, and they have birthdays, but they might not be in your hotel when they have their birthday. So why not automatically send them flowers to his home address? So if birthday happens in 3 days, that's when this happens, then send a notification to this florist through the API to send flowers with this nice card from the GM, and you never have to manually do that, but to certain VIPs, you send flowers to their home address, and it is the nicest personal touch that you could give to a customer without ever doing any job besides paying for the flowers. You could also go, for example, if it's the birthday again, you could send a handwritten card. So you've got these services where people in some center write handwritten cards, because if you don't want a computer printed cards, you just get someone to do it through the API. They write this card, it gets sent to their home address on their birthday, and you never ever forget a VIP guest birthday. And that's how we think about really extremely hyper-personalizing customer experiences without actually remembering to do things on a specific day, because we forget as humans, unfortunately. And the possibilities with the Zapier are absolutely endless. You just have to get really creative with it. So if you get a lot of, wholesale bookings, they come in via email to a reservation office, then a poor monkey in the back office has to type that email into a reservation into the system. What we do, we take that email, we read it, we parse it through the API, and we create the booking automatically, so that then no poor person in a back office has to ever type in these reservations manually again, because we can just read emails nowadays, and you can really take that to quite extremes.